Well, and here we are. Margaret, thank you for joining me today as a part of this author interview series. And it's Prime Days, so there's a lot of stuff going on. But what could be better than going back to the roots of Amazon when they were just an online bookstore, and then talk with you, the people that actually created that content that made Amazon a good place to get books back in those days, and it still is. And so with that, Margaret, can you just give a quick introduction of who you are, and we'll just keep going, and we'll talk about Annie, California life and interesting stuff and go from there.
All right. I won't tell you about when Jeff called me and he said he was starting a company called Amazon.com and he was going to sell books online. I don't know what year that was, but it was, the very, very beginning. He said, I know you're an editor at Microsoft, and, wonder if you'd like to talk with me for a few minutes about editing or writing pages for Amazon. What do you think about, he just said, what do you think about selling books online?
Yeah.
And I said, well, it's an idea. I can imagine selling nonfiction. But as far as older books go or fiction, people want to page through it and they really want to touch it. And he said, okay, thank you. Click.
Could have changed your world.
Could have changed my world, but that's okay. I'm over it.
Back when I was graduating from high school, and I took the very first computer class ever offered at my high school, and we had these 4 Radio Shack computers, and we had one Apple computer, which was just fascinating because it had this color monitor, and on those Radio Shack, those TRS-80 computers, they were hooked up to a black and white television and had a Lloyd's cassette deck, and that's what we used for storage, right? And that Apple II computer had a little floppy disk, they called it, and you shove that thing in, and it was fascinating. So I go through this class, I graduate high school, I go off, I'm enrolled in Southern Oregon University to study business, and I had always been interested in business since I was in 6th grade. That's where I was going to go. And so I learned about this initial public offering, IPO, for this company, Apple. And I'm familiar with the product because we had used it. And I'm telling my dad, hey, you need to buy some of this stock in this new company, Apple. And of course, I'm 18-year-old, not even barely a freshman in college. What do you know? Yeah, could have changed my life.
We all have stories, and here we are, and we're the happy ones.
Hey, you know what? Yeah, absolutely. Do I regret it? I don't regret it, I
only regret it when I'm paying my bills, but otherwise I'm fine.
I worked with a lady that I loved her definition of success. She said, all I want to be able to do is pay my bills and not wince. I thought, you know what? I thought that's pretty good, right? The water bill comes in, you just pay it.
Yeah. there's a bumper sticker that I just saw recently. It said, "If at first you don't succeed, redefine success." I like
Okay.
that a lot.
Very good. All
So
right. So
yeah,
you
that
weren't going to
does
tell
go
us
in through
about
my bio.
you weren't going
Yeah.
to tell us about that. What else?
Yeah.
What else is going on in Margaret's world?
Well, I do writing, art, and music, and that's been what I've done pretty much since I was about 9.
Hmm.
And I asked my mother probably when I was about 9, can I be a poet when I grow up? And she said, well, you could, but you wouldn't make any money. And I said, what? I can't believe that. Because I was reading books of poetry, nursery rhymes,
Sure.
fables. Why couldn't you make a living off of that?
Mm-hmm.
But I did end up being an author, and I've written other books under my former name, Margaret D. Smith. This is the first book, Annie, California Book One, written, published under my current name, Margaret Kellermann. So what I do otherwise is, play in bands. Sometimes I just play out in at
Yeah.
farmers markets and that kind of thing.
It's nice that the world is kind of reverting back to that
It really
opportunity
is,
again.
yeah. And then right now I have a solo art show at a place in Old Town Eureka, California.
Yeah.
So it definitely is coming back in. Just I feel it just in June. People are
Yeah.
asking me again, do you want to play music out? And that sort of thing.
So for people who haven't had the benefit of being in the Northern California coast, Eureka, Humboldt County, can you just, and this is wonderful because you were a person of words. Can you describe this in such a way that people that are on Amazon are going to be flocking to?
No, we don't want that.
Well,
I'm just kidding.
Flocking to the books with pictures and accurate descriptions, because it is a magical place. I mean, I have spent time there.
It is. It is magical. I was asking somebody one time, what's the difference between Northern Californians and Southern Californians? And he immediately said, oh, Northern Californians use their inside voices. I think the reason for that is that we spend a lot more time inside. It's foggier, it's cooler. Yeah. We have a rainy season most years. We haven't had it with the drought years. Mm-hmm. But it's just, okay, I'll tell you one quick story about Northern California where I live. All right, it's 5 miles to the beach. And so the other day, I ran into traffic. A bobcat crossed the road, a fawn crossed the road, a quail family crossed the road, and a bunch of turkey vultures were feasting on something in the middle of the road. And I have learned the hard way, you do not rush them. You do not go forward with your car. They will come up at your windshield. So
okay, that's an accurate description. That's a good description. Yeah. Yeah. The coastline is, it's just a fabulous, beautiful place to go. There's the giant redwoods are unbelievable. And you mentioned the fog, and I was just thinking that those redwoods, those giant trees, they need the fog to survive.
They absolutely,
because they can't pipe that moisture all the way up to the top.
That's right.
And they actually absorb it through the fog. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of talks about how things that you wouldn't expect to interact are actually, they need each other, right?
So true. Yeah, we've been reading and hearing more about how trees, their roots underground form almost like an internet network, and they're constantly telling each other information.
Yeah. Yeah. So Janet Carey, that's watching, she just says that is a great description of the California coast.
All right.
So Janet, thank you. Yeah, that's it is. You talk about the roots in the fungi. So
Mhm.
in a former job, I was running a company, and we actually focused on soil microbiology,
Mhm.
and you study the fungi that's growing there, and these networks, and how it connects all of these trees and transfers nutrients between them and the different plants. And it is a fascinating thing to study.
Yeah.
And on a macro level, it's got uh, there's some lessons that we can learn about how we
Absolutely.
need to be connected and help each
Absolutely.
other out. Hmm.
That's right. And the first time, I don't know if I was just out in space, I never realized that wild animals really want to connect with you if they're not totally bothered by lots of traffic like we are in big cities. They
Hmm.
really want to connect with you, and they're sitting there and like, "Hey, what's up?" And the first time I noticed that was here when I moved here about 8 years ago.
Hmm.
A deer would come up to you and just kind of be curious, just like a cat or something.
Yeah. And
Or
so, where were you prior before you were there?
I was in Portland,
Ah,
up in
okay, all right.
your neck of the
So
woods.
everyone knows I'm in Oregon. I'm
Mhm.
about 90 miles south of Portland, and just another great little city for being not a little city, but great place. So you went from Portland to outside of Eureka, kind of in that area
That's
there.
right, yeah. I've just been, really enjoying Humboldt County, just, the
Hmm.
people, the community. People will, get together at the coffee house every morning and not
Mm.
really talk about, like, how's the fishing going. That's the other coffee house down the street, but this
Okay.
one, we talk about books and, well, books, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it is a haven for coffee. We talk about the
Mm.
Northwest as being a coffee spot, but it was actually, I was living in Monterey, California. I was there for a year. You went up to Santa Cruz, and I will say pre 1989 earthquake,
Mhm.
Santa Cruz. And because when the earthquake came in '89, it leveled much of the old town.
Yeah, the
And
brick.
I'll say when it was rebuilt, the character of old Santa
Mhm.
Cruz was changed. But I remember going to this little tiny hole in the wall coffee shop back in would have been 1982, and had my first sample of espresso, real coffee, if you will,
Yeah,
and yeah, cultural experience.
that's right.
And so, and now, was it the art community, or what was it that caused you to want to leave Portland?
Yeah, I just felt like it was getting. I often go back and forth between big cities and small towns, and I find myself doing that for whatever reason. I've lived in New York City and Seattle and Portland and
Okay.
San Francisco and Miami, but sometimes not out of choice.
Hmm. I've
My
heard of
dad,
some of those places. So,
yeah, my dad was in the Coast Guard, and
okay. Yeah.
we just had to move. And
Hmm.
we're moving to DC. We're moving to
Sure.
San Francisco. And when I got off on my own, I started just heading more for the coast. Just stay in smaller towns as much as I could.
Hmm. Yeah.
Portland was an anomaly. I really enjoyed my time there, but I felt like I've got to get out of here. Where am I going to go?
Yeah.
I just took a road trip with my niece, and she said, "Well, how about Humboldt?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, but it's perfect."
It's fun. From where I live, it's probably about an 8 hour drive, 8ish
Hmm.
hour drive to get down to that area.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's beautiful. It's you're driving on 101 there, and you'll just
Mhm.
see a little herd of elk on the side of the
Right.
road, and as you said, the traffic, that's the traffic jam. It's
Hmm.
fascinating. And so, music, art, writing, poetry. Um, that as I've studied, and you said, how old were you when you talked to your mom about wanting to be a poet?
9.
9.
Yeah.
So I will say that is past the time when most children, or it's the time when most children have abandoned that, because as young children, everyone is an artist, a poet, a dancer, a musician, and there's a point, and it's usually around 7 years old, when we abandon that.
It's very true. And I teach art workshops as well. And I find 4-year-olds are my favorite artists. They really are. Mm-hmm. And what I've read is that something like 95% of 4-year-olds test as highly creative. Mm-hmm. And then you get to, let's say, age 7, and it goes way, way, way down to, mm-hmm. believe it or not, something like 5%.
I don't doubt it.
It's so sad. And I do believe I blame the educational system for that.
Well,
because young children mm-hmm. are told, like, that's not a house. They mm-hmm. don't tell them that when they're 4, but they do tell them that when they're 6.
Yeah.
So, the regimentation starts very, very early. With art, I can imagine saying, that's not a house if you're in architecture school or something.
Sure.
You really need to do it.
Yeah, maybe.
But,
well, they did some research, some brain research, right, with, and specifically trying to understand creativity. And so they used jazz musicians, specifically keyboardists. And so what they did is they gave them music to play, and then they have them just play it note by note. But of course, in jazz, a big part of it is improvisation. That's the creative part of the music. And so what they did is they put them inside an MRI and had them play, and they looked at their brain while they were playing just note by note, the written music. And then they had them improvise off of that theme. And as a test to go, what's happening mechanically inside the brain during the creative part. And to me, the part that was really interesting, it wasn't what was active during the creative part, it was what was suppressed. Really? And there's the part of the brain that basically says that we care what other people think.
Wow.
That was suppressed while they were in the improv part.
Wow.
And this is part of what I think when children kind of become self-aware, and that kind of suppresses our creativity. And so one of the things that I think is that, if I want to play music or I want to do something that is creative, that I have to not worry what other people think.
And that's so hard. It's extremely hard.
Easily said.
Oh my gosh. I teach adults as well as children, and every single adult gets to a point where they're telling me with tears, that it might be their 4th grade teacher told them that they were terrible at art or something, instead of like, well, this is unusual. Tell me about this picture. It's just like, you're terrible at art. And here's a 4-year-old man saying, I don't do art anymore because my 4th grade teacher told me I was. And I say, well, guess what? Miss Vasgersian is dead. Okay. I'm sorry to tell you. He's dead.
Sure. Oh,
but we have that in our, we have that suppression still, because 1 or a billion people telling us, this isn't good.
Yeah. And so so that gives us a couple of things. One of them is to think back over your life and go, who was it that stifled your opportunity to express yourself in whatever form that makes sense for you? Mm-hmm. And what have I said
Yes.
that has maybe limited the opportunity for someone.
Well,
And
Scott, you probably have not done that because you're so, encouraging to
well,
everybody.
I appreciate that, and it is it does go back to a commitment. I'll say that I made back in 2011. I thought as we were coming up to 2012, I was going to remind. My goal for that year was to remind people how remarkable they are,
That's
because
wonderful.
as we learn things, they become hardwired into our brain.
Yes.
And so, if I was to ask you about certain mediums of art or music, you don't need to Google it up. You don't need to go to your research. You can just breathe this stuff out as if it's common knowledge, but it is not common. And, I want to remind people, wow, if you can paint, I mean, that's that you weren't born knowing how to do that, really. How to write, how to hold someone's attention with music or storytelling, or whatever it is, whether you're a CPA. And I will say that there's two levels of execution in everything. That there's the technical and there is the elegant.
Oh, that's
Because
nice.
I have seen. We were having a house built, and the guy was out there with a track hoe digging the hole, and you think, oh, this is. I mean, he's got this huge machine, and he's digging this hole. But I'm watching him. I'm saying, man, Charlie is an artist. I mean, it is just the art with an excavator. It was just
Mhm.
the movements and everything that he did. And I think we can do that at every level. And
I
so
do.
I had made this commitment to say, I am going to help people. I'm going to point that out to people. This is say, Charlie, you're just an artist with a track hoe.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, I
And
agree with you. And I try to do that too. And my personal mission statement is to encourage people to use their creative gifts.
mm,
And people might say, "Well, I don't have any creative gifts," and I would say the same thing. I would say, "You remember this is the ice cream guy with his own stand down the street. He's only
uh-huh,
17, but he bought the ice cream stand, and he's there every day, and
mhm.
he remembers everybody's orders from 6 months ago. Like, do you still want the espresso chip, the kids cone? Yes, okay, got it.
See, that's a gift, right?
That's a gift." And he said, "Well, my grandmother doesn't think it's very useful." I said, "It's perfectly useful for what you're
Mm,
doing this very moment."
absolutely. And I what would the world be without? We wouldn't have a world without creativity, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to say
Um,
without ice cream.
well, ice cream, sure. All depend. I'm a Rocky Road guy, so pretty straightforward. Um,
No, it's true. What would we do without creative
yeah,
minds and
yeah,
um, yeah, just looking around at the world.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and from a little different perspective, and going, well, what about this, and asking those questions, and then trying it out, and
Hmm.
not worrying about what other people think, and going, well, if it fails, it fails, or we'll just make a decision. We'll do something else. That's so important.
Yeah.
So I just as we got together here, I do want to talk about the resilience of Annie, California, and not to give too much away, but it's as we start the book, we're kind of midway through this journey across the country, and I will just tell you straight up that there were parts that were hard to read, not because of the writing or everything, but because of the emotional connection. And it's always hard for me to be involved reading stories or watching movies or something where children are put at harm or at risk,
Yeah.
not at harm, but at risk.
Yeah.
And there's parts of the story where it's hard to read.
Yeah. Well, Annie is she's from Eureka, and it's interesting that I started writing this well before I moved to Eureka.
Seriously?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, about 20 years ago, I started writing this. And her family is just like packed into the car and driven south. And now, when you get to the beginning of the book, she's writing in her journal. And she's talking about, I'm not telling you, but I'm telling the.
Yeah, exactly. Please. Yeah. We want people to know what's going on.
So she's in Arizona and she's stuck at a gas station and she's by herself and it's at night. How did she get here? And where are they going? Or where did her family go? But what's the trajectory? Nobody is answering her questions. She thinks they may have left her there on purpose just because she was screaming. She didn't want to be at the edge of the Grand Canyon. And as the book travels on, they do, spoiler alert, they do come back and get her. They continue to just be weirder and weirder and more dysfunctional. But the thing that helps her so much is her resilience. And I found almost after the fact, after publishing it, that resilience came up when people were talking about the book, either in reviews or in critique, that kind of thing. And I didn't even used to use that word. So I was surprised when it kept coming up. But I'd like to talk about, for the people in business in your, the people who regularly follow you. I don't know what you call them, my people.
I don't know. We're just all one. We're just a big community, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. So I looked up the word resilience, and where does it come from? Latin, meaning to jump back or to bounce back.
Okay.
That's where we get it. And I found that this was really perfect for a grant that was being offered last September, October. It was called the Funds for Artists' Resilience. And it was local. So I thought, well, there's not going to be hundreds of people going for this grant. I'll go for it. And I wanted to create an audiobook for Annie. So many people are enjoying audiobooks. I also was really interested in making something for people who either can't read or, they may be visually impaired. And so there's all kinds of reasons to have an audiobook. And
absolutely. I'm a big fan of the audiobooks. I was thinking back when my dad was growing up in the 50s, and before they had television, and it was radio programs.
Right.
And he said he loved those because you could be involved in the story. There was kind of this, you'd have this vision in your head of what was going on.
Right.
You're participating in the story. Meanwhile, he was building model airplanes or some other hobby. And then when television came, you can't, right? You can't do that. But with your book on audio, you're able to kind of go on this journey with Annie and her family and her hamster and all of the things that go on, and think of, I don't know, I think we all kind of put ourselves in there and go, what would I be at 10 years old, where you have no control and you feel like you're taking the blame. That you're responsible for these things. As you said, she thought they left her behind because standing in the Grand Canyon, she wasn't comfortable with that. And so this resilience. So I love this bounce back.
Isn't that a great word? Bounce back. Yeah. So I did receive the grant, and I loved it because it wasn't just for artists' resilience, but it was asking artists to create a project during COVID that would help the rest of the community be resilient. So it was a two-part thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So I did the audiobook in a studio with an engineer, and I had little guitar riffs in between some of the chapters. sort of like an NPR thing.
Beautiful.
And
Good
so the
production.
music comes through there.
Mm.
And I'd like to talk about, since we have a
Yeah,
little time.
we've got time. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I'd like to talk about 7 ways that Annie found resilience.
I
And
would love that,
I
because
say
it's
that she found it.
people need this. People need the encouragement and some
Absolutely.
practical things that they can hold on to. And you read through the book, and I will tell you, read the book, read through, get to the end. Don't uh, uh, like I said, some of it's hard. It's just emotionally it's hard, but get to the end and then think about these 7 ways to be resilient and how you can apply those yourself, or you can help those with, because as we say, we're all in this together, right? We need each other.
That's
And
right.
so let's talk about these 7 ways.
Great. Okay. I say that she finds resilience because she certainly, as a 10-year-old, she probably doesn't know the word resilient, and she's not studying about it. But in her journal, she says right near the beginning, right after we left home, we started Dad's plan. At night, we steal fruit and vegetables and flowers and whatever else grows. Then we drive away, sleep in the van, and the next day we sell it all to drivers along the road. The first night, we stole flowers from somebody's garden. The next night, we stole all the honey off a honey stand. The honey stand had a sign on the cash jar that said, "Honey, we trust you." Dad stole the cash jar too. I don't think stealing is honest, but every time I tell Dad that, he gets all upset and tells me, "That's enough, Annie." What's enough? I don't think it's enough. So, yeah, the tagline for this book is Annie always tells the truth.
Mm.
This gets her in trouble.
She says, what, it gets you in trouble 9 times out of 10 or 6 times out? I forget what it is, what the ratio is, but mostly you get in trouble when you tell the truth.
Yeah, that's right. And then she finds that writing in her journal, a meta thing, is writing in my journal about 17 times a day keeps me from going crazy. I think going crazy means you start to close up, like Anthony's Cafe at 8 p.m. The blinds close, the lights turn off, and the door locks. Staying not crazy means you stay open, like my Eureka bedroom window at night, open to the world so I could hear frogs saying, "Hello, hello," all night, and the deer whistling to each other in the redwoods.
Mm.
There's the redwoods.
Yeah.
A really big part of this is people often say what you said, Scott, which is it's so hard on Annie, but what kept her going were the people who were not in her family who were telling her over and over, "You're a good person. What you're saying is true, and here's some help."
Yeah. And so these things that, as you mentioned, her father's, stealing even the cash jar that says, we trust you.
Right.
And he takes that. And, but she never acquiesced to that way of life. She knew that it was not right.
Right.
And she said so and got her in trouble.
That's right.
But, this is, I said, it is always should do the right thing, because in the short time it hurts. I mean, you'll get in trouble. You'll get blamed for other people's problems, or other people will get credit for your work. But in the long run, you can still look in the mirror and you'll win. I mean, always do the right thing.
Very true. Yeah. Here's another way that she finds resilience. Well, the helpers that I was talking about.
Yeah.
In Texas, she sees a church across the road from the hospital where her parents had to go in because they hit a deer, and so they were both injured. And they told Annie and her brother to stay in the car in the parking lot. And it's at night. So she has to go to the bathroom. So she sees a church across the road. And then she says, after I did what I came for, I opened some big wooden doors that opened up to the auditorium type of place where they keep the religion. That, by the way, is everyone's favorite sentence in the book. I walked past a table with red glasses filled with candles, right up to a cross with Jesus hanging on it. He was just about my size, but he was hanging above me. Nobody was around. I stood there looking up, wondering what to say to him. Finally, I said, "Looks like you're in a lot of pain." A guy in a black robe came out of a little room with a black curtain instead of a door. He smiled like Karen's dad, who always wheels Karen's mom around in her wheelchair wherever she wants and never complains it's too much trouble. The Alamo guy said, "I wondered if you might be the Holy Ghost." I said, "No, I'm Annie. Why did you think I was the Holy Ghost?" "Because you came in so quietly," he said. "I didn't hear you." I told him I'd rather be an angel instead of a ghost. He said, "You can be an angel. That's all right." Then he had to ask, "Where's your family?" I shook my head. "Don't you know angels don't have family?" He said, "That's fair." And he asked me, "Where do you come from, Annie Angel?" I shook my head again. "No, my name's Annie California." So he asked, "Where do you live now, Annie California?" "The hospital parking lot," I said. "Oh." He scratched his head. "I'm going over to the hospital tonight to make some visits." "And where are you going from here?" So many questions I can't answer. I wish people would just know me so I won't have to tell a truth that sounds like a lie. "I'm from all over," I said, "so I guess I'll just keep going."
There's some resilience.
Yeah, you can tell she's just on the edge.
Yeah, and it's and you mentioned the Alamo guy because this particular church reminded her, looked like the Alamo, the building style and design,
Right.
And it's just there's some, when you have very little life experience, when you're 10 years old, like Annie California, and all of us were there at some point, you have very little to compare with. And so what you see is what you know. And so she kind of equates this look with these, does every church look like, or every Alamo looking thing is the church or whatever. I was reminded when I was a little kid, I was probably maybe 4 years old. And I saw my grandfather putting Christmas lights on the house. And so, of course, I assumed that he put the Christmas lights up on every house.
Oh. Wow, busy guy.
Because what we see is what we know, right?
Right.
At some point.
Yeah. And you can tell just through that reading alone that she's probably never been inside of a Catholic church.
Right.
And so she has no words as you're talking about. But you can tell that it is because when there's red candles and there's Jesus hanging on the cross at the front, then it's a Catholic church, and that must be a priest. But that's the reader filling it in.
I love that you were able to write in this way that kind of took us to that point where what we know today, we didn't know in the past. And we're able to again see it through her eyes and just see these all these red jars, right? Just a bunch of red jars. And some guy that looks like he's in a lot of pain.
Ouch.
Yeah. So resilience. Yeah. So she continues on finding ways to be resilient.
Absolutely. And I think you've already said this one. I think near the beginning you said ask the hard questions. That was one of my ways I wrote down that she asked the hard questions. This is sort of a funny one. because I actually did talk with my mom about this very thing. This was almost like my mom and my conversation. And she calls her mom Dixie.
Yes. Dixie without the E.
Yes, with the E cut off. Yeah.
E cut off, with the E cut off. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tonight in the motel, I was in a steamy, warm tub with bubbles. Dixie was smoking and sitting on the closed toilet seat, looking at pictures in Southern Hospitality, a magazine she found at the hospital. I was thinking about all the questions Peter asked me. One of them was, "Where do you come from, Annie Angel?" "Dixie?" She said, but she didn't look up. "Who had me before you guys?" She put down her magazine. "You came out of my little tummy, Annie." "You mean I came out of your belly button?" "Well, sort of," she said. I couldn't believe we were having a real conversation. "So," she said, "have I answered all your questions?" "No," I said. "I mean, before." "You were in my tummy for 9 months," she said, "and then you popped out at just the right time." "No," I said, "before that." That really stumped my mother. I did not get an answer to that.
Oh my
asking
gosh.
hard questions, so good.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. And again, there's just some stuff that is hard to read in there because there's a point, and I mean, you want Annie to have a relationship with her mother, Dixie, to have some sort of connection. And there's a point where Annie is having nightmares and tries to talk to her about them. Doesn't go well.
No, her mom just says, "Well, I had a little dream about some chicks that just popped out of a magician's hat," or something like that. And you say, "Well, great. Okay. Never mind."
Yeah. And so, it actually says in there, it's just not, it didn't make the nightmares go away, but it just got me to stop telling her about them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's so hard. You're just thinking, again, this is a 10-year-old girl. She should be able to talk about these things that are frightening her and receive comfort, not what she gets. And
vacancy.
yeah. And so again, we pick up in Arizona. She's gone from Eureka to Arizona, and she's traveling through these states with her parents, basically observing a life of crime. I don't say that she's living it, but she is observing it. She's just connected to this, but knows it's not right. So she's not absorbing it. She does develop some friendships. And I want people to read the book. I don't want to spoil this out, but I'm just saying that, and I put this in the review, is that life is a series of events. And my question is, can one event, one particular for Dixie, can that affect everything else? Because that's kind of what I see in the story here.
Great question. And can one event, I'm not going to say what it is, but can one good event, a eucatastrophe, that's a great word. It means a good catastrophe. Can that flip everything over again?
I think yes. I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say yes.
Yeah. And so in this case, we see that Annie is resilient, but her mother, Dixie, absolutely is not. There is no resilience in that woman.
It's sad. Yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah.
But I think what I've found from various reviews is that people say, "I loved Annie," and I love it when people just glom onto this character and they love her instead of like, the book was good. I liked the book, you know. They say, I loved Annie. And in that way, they ingested her character. They really enjoyed her character.
Yeah, it's the book is well written. I would like to listen to the audio version too, because I think there's some poetry is always best when it's voiced by the author. In my perspective, this is
when the author can read.
Perhaps, yeah.
I've heard some really terrible readings by the author.
Well, yeah, okay. But I'm just thinking there's some inflection, there's some emotion, there's the emphases that only the author would understand. Now, maybe there's some great interpreters out there too that would be able to present it. But my other question is that I mean, I will say this is a very gripping and compelling story that would also make, I could see like a Netflix 6-episode series of Annie California. And this is only book 1. So I don't know where else Annie is going to go. She's still 10 years old. And so, I'm just putting it out there because we're on Amazon Live. There's a lot of people here. And I'm just saying, if some producer out there got a hold of Margaret and said, this is what I'd like to do, would you be interested?
Totally. I can see it. I could see it as a movie. And every time I, just started with a blank page and started again, I thought, how is this going to be visually interesting? Not only to us as adult readers, but I want to grab 8-year-olds or 10-year-olds' attention throughout the very, very short chapters. It might just be like a 4-page chapter. That's for the 10-year-old. The adults can keep flipping through, but I want to be able to just have the, a 10-year-old like yourself or like me, like as we were. I bet you remember just taking one friend and going away for the day with little day packs. This is what I did. It was one of my favorite days. We had our little Kodak cameras and we just went through the fields and had lunch and then came back. And that's the kind of thing I want to remind people about here too. So
yeah, I think, because there's, as I'm reading through, you're creating these visuals that I'm able to see. And I've been to different places. I've been to the Alamo, so I know, I've been to the Redwoods, and I know what she's kind of thinking back to.
Right.
And as she travels around, and then just in the gas station and all these, these gritty places and whatnot. And I was thinking back. Oh my gosh, but I just lost his name. Who was the author of Andromeda Strain? And Michael Crichton. Crichton.
Yes.
So many of his books were made into movies, and he was actually accused by some other authors that he was writing to be produced visually. And he said, no, my books just naturally become movies because I write in a visual way.
Yeah.
And this is where I was thinking with Annie California. I was seeing these things. I will say that when Jackson came out with Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, when the first one came out, I wasn't going to go see it.
Right.
Because I think Tolkien wrote so well that I had this image of all these places, and I didn't want to go see Jackson's vision of what they were. And then a friend of mine told me, oh, you won't be disappointed. And apparently Tolkien wrote so well, we had the same visions. Many of us who read
That's
that
funny.
book.
Plus, a lot of it was filmed in New Zealand, right? Which is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
Right.
Start with good ingredients, and the meal is fine.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I've got 3 more to do. So can I do those real quick?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
please. I
Yeah.
want everyone to get the benefit of Annie's resilience.
All right. Thank you. This is number 5, if you're keeping track. Number 5 of how Annie finds resilience. This is find beauty in nature, and we've talked a lot about that already. After lunch, Crowboy, and Crowboy is another helper that she finds along the way in Georgia, found me weaving through the nectarine trees with Luke and Music. Luke is the dog and Music is the cat. Come on, he said, I want to show you something. He took my elbow and led me around the pasture to some bee boxes in a field of long grass in front of the woods. This is what I call bee gardens, he said. He stood there with his hands stuffed in his pockets. I don't see any gardens, I said. You got to look closer, he said. Get down on the ground. Look through the grass sideways. Down there, I had a bug's eye view. All kinds of eensy-beensy flowers were poking out from the grass, and bees were everywhere, stuffing themselves with flower food and moving on. Bee gardens, I said.
Yeah, I love that. There's actually research that talks about there's this when people see grandeur in nature, like standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. If you've been to the Grand Canyon, it's unfathomable how big it is. It's just you can't. There's no depth perception anymore. All you can say is, "Wow." And but when people experience that, or a beautiful sunset, or some other item in nature, that they become more philanthropic. That they just it's
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and so I love that's part of the resilience.
Because they've been given they have been given generosity, they are able to be generous.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that about being more philanthropic, but it totally makes sense. That's great.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
That was number 5. So we got number 6
is take good risks.
Okay.
There are several very bad risks that she does not take. Way to go. And she does decide to take a good risk here. She's afraid of heights, as I probably said. But Crowboy wants to take her up to his hayloft so they can look down at the scenery. And he says, I'll be right here behind you on the ladder, so I'll catch you. And when we get to the loft door, I'll be right next to you. But what if I started to say, fall? If you feel like you're falling back, lean forward, Crowboy said. If you feel like you're falling forward, just lean back. I hadn't thought of that. That's like, one of those Japanese koans, K-O-A-N, just a tight little thing. Somebody told me that one time. If you feel like you're falling forward, lean back. If you feel like you're falling back, lean forward.
Yeah.
And the last one is believe in beyond. So here she is. They're almost where they're supposed to arrive in Rhode Island. And they still haven't made it there yet. So they're in a tent in a parking lot. So I looked out the window at the top of the tent. Zigzag lightning came out of a dark cloud and made electric stars on a power pole. I said the words the weaver lady taught me while she was making that rug in Arizona. The words usually make me feel a little stronger, even though I don't get what they mean. I keep writing them down. Home at the edge of the last light, home at the edge of the first light. A great storm opens the way. Lightning stars run through fields. Mountains move. Waters roll. Fly in and out of broken light. Holding nothing in my hand, I fly in circles, then fly home.
Wow.
So that one is believe in beyond. Believe in the beyond.
Yeah.
There's something better right up ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was Herb Keller was Herb Keller. What was his name? Herb Keller was the the Southwest Airlines guy. I'll have to think of his last name. Anyways, the head coach for the U.S. Olympic team, the hockey team in 1980, and he said you have to prepare for what's coming around the corner. Basically, I forget what the exact quote was, and that is believing that there is something beyond, right? We can't see it, we don't know it. It's there is no tangible way to prove that it's there, right? But believe in the beyond. I love it.
Great.
Well, this has just been fabulous, Margaret. Every time we talk, I'm just enriched. So much fun.
I feel the same way about you.
So thank you for joining us, joining me and everyone else who's been watching it here for this whole author interview series. And I encourage you, click on the book, Annie, California, book 1. Add it to your cart, get it in whatever form works for you. The Audible version, I'm looking forward to that as well, because it's nice to, the great things about books is that we can reread them. And I forget who had the quote, is that it's like visiting an old friend when
That's
you read
right.
the book.
That's right. I just finished reading Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for the first time in about 20 or 30 years. And
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
my gosh, Lewis is better than ever.
He is, isn't he? Yeah. I like the Space Trilogy, and I just during COVID reread the Space Trilogy.
Oh, great.
C.S. Lewis. And I'm currently, just so we know what's on the bookshelf, we are just about to arrive in Yokohama in Jules Verne's Around the World in 80 Days.
Wow.
That's where I'm at. And it's summer. You got to have fun with your reading, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So definitely add Annie, California to your reading list.
That's right.
And so what other projects do you have coming up? I mean, you've got this show going on at the gallery.
That's right.
And
I'm going to have a reading / party, really a party for Annie, California, and everybody who wants to come. It's going to be free. And if you are in Ferndale, California, we're going to just give out tickets a few days beforehand to make sure that it's not a bunch of people. But the old steeple is a wonderful, it's a 1890s church that has been converted into a wonderful music venue for people coming through. Nice. And also where I teach art. So, I'll be there doing reading, and there'll be a book signing and cupcakes, and who knows? But that's going
fabulous.
To be yeah.
And just hanging out with cool people, right?
Yeah.
And it's nice. I know that California has released a lot of the restrictions. We should still be cautious, but that's a natural thing, right? We should have been, when I was at a restaurant and I was watching the person in the back cooking, wearing a mask and wearing gloves. And I'm like, why wasn't that being done beforehand anyway?
There's a lot of that.
So some of these things have, we've been resilient, just like Annie in those 7 ways. Again, Margaret, thanks for taking the time. We'll go ahead and wind this one down. Stay in the green room, and I'll chat with you for a moment afterwards.
All right.
But I just want to tell everyone, please buy the book, listen to the Audible, get the Kindle, get the paper version, whatever works for you. You will love going on the journey with Annie, California. And with that, we're going to close this episode down of the author interviews.